Welcome to the Lovecars on the Grid podcast, your global motorsport roundup with me, Tiff Needell, and Paul Woodman.
Welcome to Lovecars on the Grid, your global motorsport podcast roundup. It was a funny old weekend because it's the last Formula One of the season, which was pretty dull, I'll be honest with you. But there's loads going on, loads to talk about. We say goodbye to Seb, of course, and possibly Daniel Ricciardo, although that's a bit of a mishmash at the moment.
Yeah, we'll talk about that. Yeah, but
finally, we can talk about F2, Tiff, as well. So finally, after a hiatus, that we can talk about the F2 and a couple other bits and pieces. But let's go straight into the race before we go on to any news, because the Formula One Abu Dhabi, it was a dull race. It was a really dull race.
Nice Sunday lunch and too much red wine, and I might have missed a bit of it. But I said the whole Abu Dhabi thing, it's still a sour taste in so many people's mouths. You know, and I'm one of those that just memories flood back, and it's not a good racing track. And they spent all that money turning that the second chicane on the two back straights into this long left-hander. They made it almost too quick, so they can't overtake. I think the idea was to help overtaking, but it didn't. It almost made it worse than it was with the two chicane system. And the whole setup and the coloured edge and track limits, it's just not a track where you watch a racing car go around and think, wow, that's exciting. That's, on the edge. It's a great scene and all the boats, the Monaco, the Middle East, but it just doesn't inspire me. And as we'll talk about the F2 race later, and that was processional as well. It's just a track that doesn't create exciting racing. And
what did they do to make it different? Because I don't mind it being the last race of the season there, but it was so dull. It was a procession.
Yeah, they tried, because they took out that extra chicane before about turn 4 and the hairpin where Mick Schumacher went into the back of Latifi. And also when Max overtook Lewis last year. So they did create that, but it hasn't. People don't overtake there, because the trouble is you get your DRS going into that braking zone. So it almost invites you to not overtake braking into that hairpin. So they've tried things. They fiddled with the circuit, but
the thing is, you're right, because when it's too fast going into a corner, you just can't go to a breadth through the corner. There's one line.
No,
but when it's
also the modern drop cars, there's downshifting and braking right the way into the corner. So it's not the old days when you used to brake in a straight line, and turn in. So they can brake so late for corners, like 50 or 30 meters, and then they're already turning in. And there was hardly any overtake. A lot of people tried to go around the outside and didn't make it. So, the track doesn't inspire good racing, and I'm afraid the whole atmosphere of Abu Dhabi doesn't inspire me at the moment. So maybe it'll pick up in 2 or 3 years' time, and it'll all get wonderful again. The only real interest of the race was that battle for second in the Drivers' Championship, hasn't it? Which was a lot of cat and mouse. Gave a bit of tension. I woke up enough to feel the Checo catching up with Leclerc and Leclerc on it. And meanwhile, out front, Max was just supreme again. I mean, if you put one of the best drivers in the best car, you just get a performance like that. It's just supreme,
15 Grand Prix in a season.
A magnificent achievement.
What a driver. We'll come on to a bit of news a bit later, because Max is massively in the news. A lot of controversy this week with Max.
I've moved on. There was no controversy at the weekend.
We will discuss that in a minute, but let's carry on with the race. I was really, really pleased. I'm not a massive Checo fan, I'll be honest. I was really pleased that Ferrari took second place, or Charles took second place, just because of that whole kerfuffle that happened last week.
We didn't want Red Bull to have the full clean sweep of first and second of the constructors. So
the amount of times they mentioned the word team, I would love some analyst to tell me how many times Christian Horner, Verstappen and Checo, team.
Yeah,
we're a team.
We're a team. We're going to do everything to help. But in fact, he did hold Checo back. I mean, it was a bit of a sort of controversy, because when they were both running the hard tires, and Max was going to make his last till the end, and Checo knew that he had to get on with it because he wore out his mediums too quickly in the opening laps. He blistered, so he was on the whites earlier than everybody else, which is what he had to go to the two-stop system. And so he was actually, because Checo got within 2 seconds or so. And even that, I love the way sometimes they do these new regulations, you're going to follow closer. And the story about Checo, once he got within 2.5 seconds, he had to back off because he was getting into Max's dirty air, which was wearing his
Did he have
tyres
to
out.
back off? Because surely any driver in the world, he's on a 2-stop strategy, so he's not having to worry about his tyre degradation. Surely any driver in the world is going to push a bit harder, put him under pressure.
Why would make him move over?
Why would he give up 2.5 seconds for him to go back?
I agree. No, Max shouldn't have. I totally agree if, I was Max. But why,
and
as you
Ferrari
say,
was just behind Checo.
Yeah.
2 seconds behind him. So it's just, that was a ridiculous thing to do. Then it would have put the Ferrari into DRS, most likely. So Checo, if you want to overtake somebody, and then you're on a different strategy, push them.
Get on with it.
Get on with it, son. It's as simple as that.
Maybe he was still hoping to do a one stop. And I think, when the Ferrari told Leclerc, didn't they, over the radio so that Red Bull could hear it, do what Checo doesn't do. And I think he was slightly panicking. I think he was half actually himself trying to keep his tyres to last a bit longer by not pushing up to Max's 1 second thing. I still think DRS should go to 2 seconds. I think that will make a lot. They're talking, actually, I've read that they're talking about opening it on the second lap or the first lap instead of waiting till lap 3. So that, because we always get these open, when everyone's on the same tyres, all fresh tyres, you can't follow that closely because we've seen that they're all spread out to, just about 1 second. It seems to happen within the first 2 laps. So I'd make it 2 seconds, give you more DRS, make them catch up.
Maybe there'd be a lot more overtaking if that was the case.
But yeah.
Max is going to be gone, whatever. I was so disappointed with the Mercedes. I thought Mercedes after Brazil, they were going to be on it. It was so disappointing.
Lewis was lovely, what his interview, just with a smile on his face. This is the last time I'll ever drive this car. It won't be one I want to buy, one have in my collection. I never want to see this car again. And of course, they had the first ever retirement. I couldn't believe that until they said it. That this was the first mechanical retirement for Mercedes all season.
Yeah.
So he'd driven that pig of a machine, going around, hating it, never breaking down, but still having to. Which is why they did quite well in the points.
That's the first mechanical retirement. But he's retired. Yeah, he's had some DNF.
Yeah, did he? I can't remember. I was trying to challenge that statistic, but I couldn't be bothered to go through all the races. But
well, there are statistics coming out of their ears, and one that I absolutely love is so since 2017. So with Leclerc finishing P2 in a title runner-up, with Leclerc being runner-up in a championship title, that means since 2017, whoever won the first race of the season ended up coming runner-up in the.
Oh, you're sounding like Crofty now. I can't be bothered. That can't be us.
Like
no, it's not. I'm so bored with Crofty's
I've got it in front of me here. Okay, let's talk about...
They're doing these statistics now more and more. I was listening to tennis at the weekend, and they're all these commentators now are all working out. It's the first time a left-handed bloke with only one bollock has finished in the top 6 since February 1934.
Okay, well, a more significant one, and one that's easy to follow, is, of course, a whole season, Lewis Hamilton without winning a race or pole position for the first time since the year dot or whatever. So that's quite significant, I think. And it's but anyway, I'm with you on the stats. They do get a bit.
The other interesting battle, though, was that battle for the only other thing was the battle for being, what was it, 6th in the constructors. And it meant $12 million difference. And that annoys me slightly because I think the whole problem with this money sharing is that it does encourage manufacturers to have, we'll talk about Hulkenberg confirmed, for these blooming points. And I would much prefer it if the 10 teams just shared the money equally. So let's not have this positions, because it's the Constructors' Championship that holds off young drivers getting their hopes and giving a chance. And so
look at it from the other side, though, Tiff. If you're, there's got to be. It's like football with the Premiership. There's such massive incentive to be better, to improve. So maybe think about it a little bit more.
I don't know, because the trouble is the rich get richer despite the budget cap. The smaller teams still have to get drivers bringing money, most of them, because they don't get enough money out of the Formula Ones. If they all had enough money to fill the budget cap without having to have pay drivers, then that would again encourage teams just to look for talent and talent alone that's going to excite the Grand Prix grid.
Well,
so anyway, who was it? So it was the battle between what Alfa and Aston, wasn't it? It was Aston Martin, equal on points in the end, but not enough.
Yeah.
So Alfa Romeo got the extra $12 million. It'll soon become Audi. They probably won't need $12 million when Audi are there,
but I bet they won't agree with you on splitting it between them. They're going, yes, sir, it's a brilliant idea that we get that extra 12 million. Thank you very much.
Valtteri Bottas is saying, I'd quite like to drive for Audi. I'm sure he would, Valtteri.
Yeah, I'm sure he would.
Don't. I mean, Alfa have, got a sort of number 2 team leader and a number 2 Formula 2 driver promoted because of his Chinese money. And they just had an average season, Alfa. And, I think if a more spectacular driver had been in those Alphas, they would have been further up the grid and done better.
I'm not being funny.
They're all very, very, very good drivers. But I talked actually on Twitter about, I think there's only 5, and I corrected myself, 6 5-star drivers, on the grid.
But you say that, but is Charles Leclerc? So your star drivers were Lewis, George, Max, obviously, Lando, which I agree with, and Charles. And I forgot Alonso. Alonso's still in it. But is Charles Leclerc a star driver? Is he one of the all-time greats?
I think he is. I know he's made some mistakes. I know, but I think the talent is there. That drive he had at Abu Dhabi, you saw him at the end. Normally these Grand Prix drivers jump out as fresh as daisies. They're incredibly fit. But Charles looked knackered. I think he had really put everything into
that doesn't make him an all-star great, an all-time great.
No, but he held off a guy in the best car on the grid.
No, he didn't. He just managed to maintain that little bit of a distance because Checo got held up a little bit as well.
Yeah, he still held him off.
Nothing was masterclass about Charles Leclerc.
Every second counted. If he'd lost a couple of seconds in the 70 laps, however many there were, Checo would have been in DRS in the last 2 laps. He had to be, as they all Italians. The Italians do that. On it. Yeah, sorry, for people only listening. For those that only listening and not viewing, I have my thumb under my chin on the limit.
I don't think he is an all-star great, an all-time great. Not yet.
Anyone else you're going to put? So you think it's just 5 then? You're kicking Charles out for the 5 stars.
I do. I just don't think that he's. I don't know. I don't think he's there. He hasn't been far superior to color science. He hasn't been. He's been superior, but not blown him away. Look what Max has done to Checo. He's blown him away.
Max is top notch.
He's on a different level.
Charles have to wake his ideas up. His brother's up into Formula 2 for next year, Arthur Leclerc. So he'll have to keep going stronger. Otherwise, his brother will usurp him.
Yeah, but let's not forget he was leading the championship. I know Ferrari had some issues and whatever, but
he made mistakes.
He made lots of mistakes.
Yes, I know.
He's not an all-time great, not yet. Maybe
not yet.
And I would love to see Lando have that opportunity. Lando, do you know he finished 7th on his own by a country mile? Nobody even came close to Lando. So in that race to the first place of the second division, if you want to call it that, he was the most superior. He is the masterclass, fellow Somerset boy as well.
Yeah. No, all for Lando. That's why I put him in one of the brilliant drivers. He hasn't achieved much yet, but it's such a shame he didn't win at Monza last year.
Isn't it?
I still feel for him when he was with George being interviewed after George won his first Grand Prix. 2 retirements in the Grand Prix. Alonso retired in Hamilton. Mick Schumacher went out in a load of unglory by knocking Latifi around. And Ricciardo, of course, we're going to talk about the driver swaps and, the wonderful celebrations of Seb's career. And Ricciardo not retiring still annoys me. I think we should be celebrated. They would have been good. The 2 of them retiring together. They could relive the what was it, 2-1, 1-2 thing, 2-1. Can you remember what was on the pit board?
But would you want to give up if you have the opportunity to cling on to that and income and that razzmatazz? I don't know.
Well, the trouble is, I didn't have a choice. I was forced into, after my brief Grand Prix career. I had no other option than to race in sports cars, race in Japan, race in America. And looking back, I so value the fact that although I did only 1 Grand Prix or 2 and tried to qualify, I had such a variety of driving circuits and experiences. And that's perhaps when I grew up. Jim Clark, they would do sports cars and single-seaters and saloon cars and everything, and had that wonderful width of experience. But these Formula 1 boys had this career in this tunnel, going to the same places, the same pressure, the same press conferences. And I just think, Daniel, if I could get in his ear, he'd love Le Mans or IndyCar or IMSA and, just doing something different than... Now he's going to be hanging around in a garage with headphones on, being a reserve driver, going to all the Grand Prix, but not driving.
But they
sitting in there doing the press conference in the hope that someone will drag him back in next year. I think it's just a shame. I just think, for his hordes of fans, he's such an entertaining driver, wonderful character. And
who are the best marketeers probably in the world? Red Bull. They spend over 40% of their total revenue on marketing, so they know that he's a marketing machine. They know he's brilliant. He's funny.
But he could be on a Ferrari at Le Mans next year, or Porsche. I mean, because sports cars are now taking off again. This new generation we talked about last week, the sports car racing. It's going to be exciting, and he'd go to Daytona and Sebring, and he'd go to different circuits. And I just think as a racing driver, he'd be much happier, than this desperate thing of staying in this little circle of 20, little clique.
But also what it does, Tiff, don't forget, it stops somebody else coming through.
Yeah, well, that's why I get across. That's why I want that's why I want Bottas to move on. He's had a fantastic career. He's had millions of pounds, Don't have him Audi, give a youngster, get some more drivers in, give Bottas a Le Mans drive, sports cars.
I mean, Bottas should be dropped for that moustache alone. Simple as that. They should drop him for that moustache. That's so offensive.
That's a good point.
He looks like the guy from Mario Brothers. Are you allowed to even say these things now? Is that moustacheist or something?
Probably.
Know. Yeah.
So let's just go through all the who left and who's coming. So the Sebastian leaving's the biggest change, because that Alonso's in his place. Alonso left AlphaTauri, so Gasly's moving to Alpine after having a miserable end of season in AlphaTauri. I mean, AlphaTauri, they finished 9th in the constructors. There was always accused that they had sort of Red Bull designs in their cars, and therefore they'd be really quick. They've had a terrible year, so I'm sure
they were so hot and cold, weren't they? They were really. Yeah.
But Yuki's been almost blowing Gasly away the last few races. I mean, Yuki had a good Grand Prix. He finished 11th or 12th, didn't he, compared with Gasly? So Gasly's in the Alpine, which left the space at AlphaTauri that Nick de Vries is in.
Sorry, Tiff. In terms of Alpine, Ocon and Gasly, who's your and that's going to be fiery. That's going to be fiery, that relationship.
Well, I still think Gasly. I had Gasly down as an almost 5-star a few years ago. I don't know. He did some amazing AlphaTauri drives, or what they call Toro Rossos back then. I don't know. Was he Toro Rosso when he was racing originally? I just still think Gasly might come alive, but I've been disappointed with him this year, I must admit.
Such a cocky little kid, isn't he? He's so. You've got to have confidence.
But he beat Alonso in the points. At the end of the season, he was ahead of Alonso in the points, which people often point out.
Which I'm really surprised at, because Alonso had so many spectacular drives, and Ocon never really was in it.
Yeah, but Alonso had semi-retirements, got let down so often by his engines. As he pointed out on more than one occasion. So all the trouble with Fernando, he'll still say what he's thinking, which I like, but sometimes he's trying to be centre of attention too much, maybe. So good that Nick de Vries has got a Grand Prix. He should have had it about 5 or 6 years ago. So that's a good story.
Who's going to do better here, Yuki or Nick? Who's going to come out on top?
I don't know, because Nick's in the. Yeah, I don't know. I think Nick de Vries is a better driver, so I think he should be.
Okay.
But Yuki's been getting better slowly. So it's interesting pairing that actually next year. Interesting. Ricciardo's leaving, of course, has got Oscar Piastri in. I think that's very interesting. A real talent that won Formula 3 and then Formula 2 in consecutive years. And drivers that do that, like Charles Leclerc did, is the ones that catch my eye. The ones that can bounce straight up, through Formula 3, Formula 2, champion. So very excited to see Oscar Piastri in. Which should be giving Lando a good margin. See how they get on together.
But your money will be on Lando.
Yes, sure. I still think for sure. Well, certainly for the first year, it's a bit like Lewis and George. George is the sort of Oscar Piastri that's come in to go up against the great Hamilton. So it'll be very interesting. Mick Schumacher lost out last week. We hinted at it, and then it happened. I think the day after our podcast, it's Hülkenberg coming, and that just depresses me intensely.
It's just weird.
Because Schwartzman had another FP1, the Ferrari. Because Ferrari was supposed to have an influence. That's the story I always had on who drove the second Haas, because of the Ferrari engine deal. And Robert Schwartzman had another good FP1 series in the Ferrari. But of course, he's Russian, but he's now Israeli, and maybe that's against him. So anyway, poor Mick goes out. I feel a bit sorry for him. Obviously, the name's great, but I'm sure he will probably go to sports car racing and have a great professional career and enjoy life. Hülkenberg comes back and because Kevin K-Mag, he's not a 5-star. K-Mag's a really good 4-star driver that's had this opportunity to come back and occasionally done incredible things with his Haas, which, does work well. But he was blown away by Schumacher last weekend. Mm. So you're never quite sure how good K-Mag. So I think Haas have ended up with two solid professionals, but nothing exciting in the team. Although K-Mag can cause a lot of excitement. And then, of course, Latifi's gone.
Who's your money on there? Hulk or K-Mag?
I have no idea. Yeah. I don't know. They'll both sort of be up and down. I think they'll both be inconsistent. Oh,
well, you just hit the nail on the head. It's not exciting. I would have loved to have seen somebody young,
something new to talk about.
Come through. Yeah,
I mean, no disrespect to either of them. I don't know. They both had great careers. They both earned money. They're both solid professionals.
Good on them as well, because if I had that opportunity and I was well into my 30s, I would be saying happy days. Thank you very much.
And then, of course, leading us into the Formula 2 race, the best news the whole weekend was Logan Sargeant getting enough position. I think he finished third of the table. I didn't look where he ended up in the end. I think he was third. Nicholas Latifi's bought his 2 or 3 years, hasn't he had, thanks to his parental money. So, he's a nice guy, and he again will have a career somewhere. He'll be racing for many years to come, whether it's IndyCar or sports cars, if he wants to, if he chooses to. But yeah, it's great to see Logan Sargeant coming into Albon had a couple of weeks. He was like 10th quickest at FP3 or something, and then he qualified 19th or something. The Williams seems to occasionally flatter and then sort of doesn't. But anyway, that'll be a good pair. Nice, colourful young couple of drivers in Williams, and hopefully they can get the car a bit quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. It's all down to the car there, because it must be frustrating having the slowest car on the grid. But yeah, good to see Logan Sargeant. That would have been a travesty if he didn't get enough super points for his license. So good stuff there.
So he had a couple of 6th places. He had a couple of 6th places in the F2 racing, didn't he? In the F2 racing was pretty processional. Yeah. There was quite a good battle at the end of the main race with the champion Felipe Drugovich, who's an Aston Martin reserve driver now for next year. Woodman, Ayuma Iwasa, a very talented, Japanese in his rookie season, a Red Bull backed. We mentioned him a few races ago. But it's weird, this F2, because you talk about this track you can't overtake. So Iwasa was on pole, the fastest Formula 2 driver in qualifying. So he started the sprint race in 10th, and he finished 13th. You imagine these reverse grids. It's supposed to be, to show how someone could overtake. But if they go to a track where you can't overtake, nobody goes anywhere. And of course, the winner of the sprint race, was Liam Lawson. I think he was 9th quickest in qualifying. So he started 2nd on the grid for the sprint race, got the lead early on, and won it quite easily. So, I don't know, these reverse grids. That really shows tracks. I think in Formula 2 racing, the best thing it demonstrates the sprint race is which tracks you get overtaking, and which tracks you don't. And so that was a serious demonstration of what you don't get at Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, that's true. Actually,
so Lawson's an interesting career kid. I mean, he's a Kiwi who hasn't done as well as Red Bull backed in F2 as people thought. I mean, he won the sprint race because he was at the front. But he had a good drive from 9th on the grid to 3rd in the main race. So he got 2 podiums. So a lot talked about him as being a great talent. He hasn't. But again, if you don't get the right team in Formula 2, this is still such a problem coming up to the ranks. There was a Formula 4 test last week somewhere for next year's Italian Formula 4 or something. And the top 6 were all Prema drivers. Because Prema seemed to have the key to the door for a lot of these junior Formula. They've got brilliant engineers that know if you put another millimetre of camber on one wheel, the car will go quicker, So, I don't know how good Liam Lawson's team's been, and he hasn't got the results expected. He's now off to Japan to go to that Superform, incredibly competitive series over in Japan, which has been used by Red Bull. So Gasly went out there. They took Pato Award out there briefly, and I always forget one name, so I'm not going to start thinking of it anymore. But they send people to Japan, and it's a great series. So hopefully Liam can do really well out there, and maybe be in the AlphaTauri next year. Who knows where that might go? Okay. So, but yeah, Drugovich, a good champion, but it all depends so much on what team you end up in.
Yeah, but that's the same as Formula 1, Tiff, isn't it? It's exactly the same.
Yeah, but you always in the olden days, you felt that talent always merited getting the best. Your results showed because the driver was 50% the deal, or even more, and the car was less important. So the talent shone when the cars were less scientific. Now, if you haven't bought the Prema Formula 4 seat, Daddy hasn't got enough money. You're not gonna win.
You're such a cynical bugger, aren't you?
You look at the results. Look at the results. I mean, I would love
to see. I know it's going back to Formula 1, but I would love to see Lando Norris. Nothing to do with the fact that he's British, but I think he is one of the best talents on the grid. And I would love.
But he did have a dad to buy him the best cars. So his his career. He had the talent, but. Even when we watch him in Ginetta Juniors, I think almost Ginetta Juniors is a better talent sorting formula than Formula 4 single seaters. Because Ginetta Juniors, the cars are quite tricky to drive, and Lando was a star in them, and went on.
It does help if you've got the backing. Your father's got a few quid when you're growing up. Of course, it does. It's a super expensive sport, but then when you get to this level, and there's only such a tiny percent that do get to this level. You need that extra little bit of talent.
Extra team, you pay 3 million or 4 million pounds for a season of Formula 2. I don't know what it is now. It's all silly money.
Right. Can we go to news?
We'll finish news on Seb. I think we should finish before we move on to general news.
Good thing.
I think we must talk about Sebastian Vettel, the hippie, the scruffy bloody hippie on the grid. And I've always
he doesn't look like a Formula 1 driver, does he?
I mean, it was a 15-year career, wasn't he? He started in Sauber, and I always remember the win at Monza. The youngest Formula 1 winner when he won in the Toro Rosso, the sort of second stream Red Bull car. And that was an amazing result. He held off. I forget who was catching him at the end in the wet. Drove an amazing race. Then, of course, he got promoted to Red Bull. We had that wonderful, 6 years with Red Bull with 4 championships. Yeah, we talk about, anti-Red Bull now or whatever. We're not. I mean, I love Red Bull then. I mean, it was a magnificent team. And there was so much fun in it. You remember Seb? I can't remember any of them. He called his cars different names, Dirty Daisy or something. He nicknamed each year. There was so much fun at Red Bull when he was there. Have you
seen Christian Horner, Checo Perez, or Max Verstappen
have as much fun as that? No.
Smile, not fun. Even smile. I don't even think I'm smile. They did have fun back then, but they
had that year. Then Ricciardo almost beat him his last year. He slumped a bit and got a bit criticised for only being good because of Red Bull. He went to Ferrari. He had 2 runners
with any world champion.
You have an off-season occasionally.
Yeah.
So he was anyway. He was challenging Lewis then in the Ferrari, but he was runner-up, and then he's moved to Aston Martin. So he had 300 starts, 53 wins, and a great character. Always loves always a bright. And even now when he was retiring, he brought some fun, and it wasn't doom and gloom. And that meal they had.
That was brilliant.
Have you read the story of the price of the meal?
That's rubbish. There's no way a meal for 20 people can cost 140,000. It cannot, without alcohol.
Especially without alcohol.
It can't. I'm sorry. That's just rubbish. It's absolute rubbish. So even if it was £2,000 per head, it's only 40 grand. So if it was 2,000 a head and they're eating the most bizarre Alaskan crab,
it was rubbish.
But it was rubbish. But apparently Lewis was the instigator and picked up the tab. So I think that's classy, because him and Seb, I didn't realise they were actually so close, because I thought they, after all those years of rivalry, but I guess they've been around.
Yeah, I think they've been around for a long. He hasn't talked about future racing, has he, at all? I don't know what he's said in any interview. I've never picked up on what Seb's planning for the future. He just sort of walks away, and he hasn't sort of retired from motor racing.
He's got a brilliant old brain on him as well. He was on Question Time once, and and don't forget, English is his second language, and it's just it's incredible, the vocabulary and his intellect. But good on him. He's going to be missed. And it was lovely to see all the tributes to Seb over the weekend. And like you said so many times, what a shame Daniel Ricciardo didn't do the same thing, because he deservedly got the same send off as well.
Now he'll peter out, because if he doesn't get another Grand Prix drive, there won't be a retiring from Formula 1 day. He'll just sort of slip away silently. Okay,
also in the news, hot topic. Tiff Needell's tweets are in the news. You've been causing a bit of a stir, haven't you? Because you're a journalist, apparently. I am. You're not a TV presenter anymore, or a motorsport fan. You're now a journalist.
That's all I am. I'm just a racing fan.
You're now a journalist. But You just regurgitating a bit of very well publicized
All I did was I read in crash.net. I read if I read stories about motor racing, I comment on. That's what Twitter's all about.
I just site on a well-known
a reputable site, crash.net. They didn't take the story off. This is the story we talk about, of course, that Max's mum did a quick Instagram that accused Perez of cheating on his wife. So I merely commented on that. I read it somewhere. It was out in the open. I didn't create it or invent it or stir it up. Yeah, I did get accused but there's always the Max fans that I was the one stirring everything up and I'm a terrible person. But I just comment on the story. I mean, it was an awkward story and things come out in the press like that. You comment on them.
Yeah, so for those of you who didn't see it, allegedly, Max Verstappen's mum made a comment that at least he wasn't cheating. Checo, referring to him, to Checo, at least he wasn't cheating on his wife or something along those lines. So
I think Sky kept very good. I think Damon Hill I saw earlier on did one about the pressure on Checo and Max, and he did say, as well as the social media this week, but that was as far as it went. They weren't going to mention it at all.
Sky are scared stiff. I mean, there was got a little bit of heat with Christian Horner, and they were sort of pushing a little bit, and he was saying, and Christian Horner was pushing back a little bit as he always does, but. It's all look. It's handbags.
It's all over.
Something's happened. It's all over.
We had a controversial free weekend at Abu Dhabi.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, where we go next, Tiff Needell? Well, I think we're going to...
Just on Formula 2 news, I mean, Ollie Behrman, we mentioned, I think, last week, was definitely in Formula 2 with Prema, who he raced with in Formula 3. And Zach O'Sullivan, of course, who beat Ollie Behrman to the Autosport Award last year. He's had his first year in Formula 3, and I think it was in Carlin, not the most competitive car. He's in a Prema-powered car. So it looks like we've got two really good young British talents in good teams, one in the Formula 2, one in Formula 3. A lot to look forward to following them around. Of course, the Autosport Awards, Ollie Behrman's still in this year's Autosport Awards. I forget who's up against. That'll be a result coming out in mid-December. So, yeah, not much. The other big news is this new girls series, women's series, female series, this Formula 4 series. And I'm getting a bit annoyed with this. I'm going to get a bit I get more Twitter upset. So the W Series served its purpose for 3 years. I think it's run out of money. It did a great job in giving a lot of women an opportunity to show their talents in the open world. But it's run out of money. And now the FIA have come up with this new Formula 4 series. So I don't know, they only said one round was good. 7 weekends with 3 races each weekend. 15 cars, 3 teams running 5 cars each. And they're talking about you have to bring 150 grand, which is that's a cheap season of single-seater racing.
Absolutely.
The FIA will put in the other 150 grand. So it means the FIA are investing about £3 million into this. But the comments they made when they introduced it, the FIA spokesman said that they're upset by the barriers young female drivers face. What barriers are these? There's this implication that the motorsport world has been trying to hold back women and they face barriers. And they said the girls don't have the same experience as boys at the same age. That's not the motorsport world's problem. That's because parents, the boys, right, have got dads and mums that will mortgage their house, go to kart races every weekend like Lewis Hamilton's dad did. The boys aren't there because motor racing's promoted them for the fun of it. They're there because families have remortgaged houses, invested all their money in their youngsters going up the single-seater ladder to become, famous. And there are plenty of parents of girls. There are plenty of rich girl parents, that could do the same thing. So it's not motorsport's fault, I think, that the girls haven't got the same experience at the same age. It's just the way the world is, I think
it's just got different interests. Typically, and it's not being sexist. Typically, we have different interests particularly when we're growing up.
Yeah, the most 8-year-old girls would go for, if you're given a choice between a go-kart or a pony, most girls, I don't know if it's sexist to say it, but I imagine if you had an election, they'd go for the pony, and most boys want to go karting. And unless the dads are there encouraging the boys probably wouldn't do it. So if you want to blame anyone, you blame the rich parents with daughters that aren't forcing their girls into karts age 8 and pushing them up the ladder.
If I said I've got a son and a daughter, if I said to them at the same age, at the age of 11, What would you like to do for your birthday party? Would you like to go and do some makeup and play around with soaps? And this is very stereotypical, but
I know
have chosen that over go-karting. Now she would pick go-karting, by the way, much more so than Oliver, but that's a different story. But I think females, and I am going to be controversial, I think they get more opportunities for this sort of thing than
at the moment,
men.
I mean, women have been racing since Brooklands before the war. I'm racing against Desiree Wilson, one of the greatest female drivers. We battled for Formula One together in the British Series, and we were on level pegging. She wasn't quite good enough. Maybe I wasn't quite good enough to get picked by Ferrari or someone to have a professional seat. So I just, it's great that they've done this series and they're sponsoring the women. I think Formula 4 is a better level to give the younger girls a go rather than the Jamie Chadwicks of this world who've done very well out of the W Series. But, Jamie Chadwick, in fact, was a wealthy daughter. And in fact, some of the other women in W Series would point out that Jamie was able to go and buy a ride in the New Zealand Series in the winter, or it was an Indian Series. So Jamie Chadwick, in fact, over the winter, did a lot more racing than the girls like, Abby Eaton and Alice Powell, who didn't have any budget to go elsewhere. And as they say, have the same experience. They didn't have the same experience as Jamie Chadwick. That wasn't a boy-girl. That was girl against girl. Alice and Abby had less experience testing than Jamie Chadwick. And that's nothing to do with their sex, because they're all the same sex. That's because the parents, the family had the money to let the young driver, male or female. So, it
just needs to be managed a little bit differently as well, because then people jump on the bandwagon and say, it's disgusting that Jamie Chadwick hasn't been offered a seat in F1. Yeah. She's not bloody good enough. It's just it's a meritorial. Meritorial, and she's not good enough. And F3 or F2. But if she wanted to go down that route, then they're great to prove herself. But anyway, we're all for the ladies to come through on motorsport, but just they're not victims here.
Well, I think it's insulting the boys and insulting the parents of the boys that have sacrificed everything. Saying that the boys have got some advantage. I mean, it's just down to the parents sponsoring them.
We are proper couple of miserable old kids, but it's not.
Poor old Calderon, Calderon in the F2. She's running around the back of the field. She's had every chopper. She's been a Formula One test driver. Calderon, but she's running around right at the back of the Formula 2 grid. There will be a girl out there, and I agree.
There will be, great,
but it's not. It's not in a way WS is encouraging girls. It's almost encouraging girls' parents, because they're the ones that have got to make it happen. The 8-year-old girl or the 12-year-old girl can't make her racing career happen unless mum and dad.
But if your father, your mother and father, or your guardians or whoever are into motor racing and they're into Formula One, they're into Le Mans, it doesn't matter whether they're watching W Series or whether they're watching Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen. It doesn't matter. If you're into it and you want to get them into it, it doesn't matter. Surely it should be a massive incentive to want to get them into it, just because they're female or because that's your passion.
It's a good series.
The breaking news is the 2023 champion is Jamie Chadwick. So congratulations to Jamie on that.
Has she got the money though? Will she get another $500,000 more than I earned in my entire motor racing career? The other race, World Superbikes finished at Phillip Island. 2 wins for the champion Alvaro Bautista. The championship already decided. Jonathan Rea had a win, which he hasn't had many wins this year. The Kawasaki Toprak Razgatlioglu had 2 second places, dominated by those 3 riders the whole season. Alex Lowe's picked up a couple of podiums with his Kawasaki. Great entertainment if you were there at Phillip Island, which I wasn't. And that was about all I picked up. Have you picked up any more gossip this week?
No, that's it. Other than your very contentious tweets.
I'm merely commenting on what I've read elsewhere.
What have we got next week? We got an amazing extravaganza next
thought
week.
The season was all over.
No. Wait until next week. We got something very special for you. What is it?
Uruguay. The Uruguayan Extreme Energy X Prix. The Extreme E's are bouncing around somewhere in Uruguay. And don't get too excited now. They'll be coming to Scotland next year. Newly announced, no location, but Extreme E's are going to go to Scotland in May 2023. And the other good news is they dropped their stupid 22-23 calendar thing. I used to moan.
Brilliant. They listened to you. Well done.
Yeah. It's now just the 2023 Extreme E calendar.
Who are those?
You won't be able to go and watch them in Scotland. It's a TV-only thing. You can't go and see these things. I'm sure some TV celebrities will bounce around and get lots of press and PR.
Who are the grumpy old men on the Muppets?
Waldorf, yes.
Well, from us, Waldorf, and whatever the other one is, thanks for joining us, and we'll see you next week.
Cheers.